Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. This is VR Download, and I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, broadcasting today with David Heaney in London. Some quick notes for new viewers. David and I meet here each week in a studio he built to discuss the next steps of personal computing. I'm using a Quest Pro right now with face and eye tracking, and that brings over some of my expressions to the viewer. We've got a global audience, and as always, please let us know where you're watching us from. I see people out there in snowy Sweden watching us this week. We love to see the global audience we have. And we've got a lot to discuss this week. David, what are we getting into?
Yeah, we really do have a lot to discuss this week. There are a lot of topics. We'll talk about Apple listing 3D movies on its Apple TV store in preparation for Vision Pro. We'll talk about the fact that the iPhone 15 Pro's latest iOS beta update lets it record 3D video to watch in Vision Pro. Immersed announcing that its Visor will have a standalone mode as they raise the pre-order price to $950. We'll talk about HTC sending a Vive Focus 3 to the International Space Station to be used by astronauts. Banter, a app that is trying to take on VRChat with a standalone first approach. We'll talk about Pico canceling its Beat Saber competitor and laying off all the developers. We'll talk about Valve's hints at its next plans for VR that it gave during an interview about Steam Deck OLED, which it is launching this month. We'll talk about Casting 2.0 for Quest that can finally capture an uncropped widescreen view, which is going to be a game changer for content creators. We'll talk about Meta shooting down the prospect of a Quest 3 eye tracking add-on. We'll talk about Quest 2's price being cut to $250 for the rest of the year, the lowest price we've ever seen on a non-refurbished standalone headset with track controllers. We'll talk about that report from the Wall Street Journal that Meta is going to bring Quest 3 Lite, the headset that we've talked about on this show before, to China through a deal with Tencent. And finally, we will talk about Samsung's Google-powered headset being set to launch late next year. So another contender or a team of contenders entering the ring.
Yeah, we're going to have to power through this. This ended up being, 12 things on my list of stuff to get through. We will get through them as quickly as we can. Let us know if you have any questions. If we don't get to them when we see them, we'll try to address them later in some way, shape, or form. We love your comments. Want to remind everyone to tune in for our showcase in early December. We've got that coming up. And please, yes, do like and share this link out with people who are getting into VR for the first time. We are going to have a big discussion today about how the market is shaping up. I'm pretty proud of our work over the last couple of weeks, talking about the problems with buying a Quest 2 right now, even though it's seeing some of the best deals. And we need people to discuss that. And it's just really important that we help those people who are new to VR get the right answers and the answers to their questions. You can do that in the comments if you get them in here, if we don't even address it in the show. So I just wanted to put that out there before we got into this first topic. David, you spotted this first bit of news, didn't you? Why don't you break this down? Because I tried to find this on my Apple TV and I couldn't. And it's a pretty big deal to have this on Apple's platform.
Yeah, well, to be clear, this was spotted by Flat Panels HD, which is a website that does reviews of TVs. They've been around for years. They're fairly reputable. They're trusted by TV manufacturers to review units, and they do these detailed technical analysis. So they noticed that for a short time, the Apple TV app was showing a new 3D icon that had the shape of Vision Pro on some movies. And so Apple had confirmed at WWC when it announced Vision Pro that Vision Pro will be able to play 3D movies. And some of these movies that were included in the list are Shrek and Kung Fu Panda 3. The movie that Apple showed off at WWDC was Avatar: The Way of Water. But interestingly, that wasn't spotted. So it seems like this was just a test. But what's interesting about this is that Meta actually used to offer a 3D movie rental service on Quest, on Rift and Go, and then it deprecated that, and Quest didn't have one for a few months, and then they partnered with Fandango to launch one on Quest, and then earlier this year they closed down that partnership. So this is another classic tale of a software feature that Apple is going to deliver as a first party experience out of the box that Meta used to have, and then deprecated and then built a new one and then deprecated, and then its current software doesn't support. So obviously the big issue with this is headset comfort. We are still not at the place where most headsets are comfortable enough to watch a 2-hour movie, stationary and have that be a really pleasant experience. That's something we've heard from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, that some early testers of Vision Pro are finding it too heavy. It's also what Apple is reportedly focused on as their primary focus for Vision Pro 2 is to make it lighter and more comfortable. But still, watching a 3D movie in a headset like this, a VR headset, is a much better experience than watching it using standard 3D glasses in a movie theater. So if you tried that and you didn't like it, I recommend trying it on a VR headset. You can do it through Big Screen today. Big Screen offers, not the headset, the actual app offers 3D movie rental and you can try it in the headset. And yes, it is a much more compelling experience for a whole host of technical reasons than watching it with 3D glasses.
Yeah, and I absolutely cannot wait to re-experience some 3D content. Avatar is obviously the chief example of a piece of content that was kind of built with the future in mind. I mean, it's been one of many productions to incorporate VR directly.
I think we just lost Ian there. I think it may just be some connection issues. I'm sure he'll be back shortly. Cirque du Soleil, I think Artful actually was mentioned as one of the 3D movies it supported. Correct me if I'm wrong. But as I've said before, this does seem like it was a test, so I imagine there'll be a lot more. But obviously 3D TVs kind of died out in 2016 and 2017 because the experience just wasn't that good. The content was difficult to get. There wasn't really a compelling reason to use it. Again, if you had a 3D TV, some people loved it, but the experience of doing it through these polarized glasses is just not the same as a VR headset where you're getting a true stereoscopic experience. Yeah, I'm sure Ian will come back shortly. Perhaps in the meantime, we'll start talking about the new update to iOS that lets iPhone 15 Pro record spatial video. So this update is now available for anyone on the beta channel of iOS. You can use your iPhone 15 Pro, not the base model, only the Pro model, to record this spatial video. And Apple didn't actually say until the last week, what spatial video really was. And their marketing clips seemed to suggest that spatial video were some kind of volumetric video, because they showed the head turning and parallax that would be impossible from just normal 3D video. The problem is they have now confirmed to CNET and to TechRadar that this is essentially just normal 3D video. Vision Pro does seem to have a very sort of clever way to present it, putting it in a rectangular bounding box and having the edges kind of blurred and extended based on the content within that box to add a wee bit more of a depth effect. But essentially, this is still just 3D stereoscopic video. It's recorded at 1080p and 30 FPS. But this is, everyone who has an iPhone 15 Pro that gets a Vision Pro can just record that video and play it back in the headset with a completely, streamlined experience using AirDrop and I assume iCloud file sync. So it's going to be probably the most streamlined capture device to headset experience for 3D video we've seen yet.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. I went and just found my article from 2011 where I tried out the Evo 3D, and this was a phone ahead of its time, is what I called it. And it had 3D capture, very similar to this. So many years ago now. It's crazy that even when you think about the history of this file format of side-by-side video, for 3D effect, it is going back into the 1800s. This is continuing the same fundamental idea, just streamlined directly on top of your existing capture pipeline in a way that that phone from so many years ago could not do. It was very, very cool at the time, but just couldn't, it wasn't going to change anything. And um, now it's so wild to go full circle with this. Yeah, I'm seeing VR Gamer Dude saying they were rocking the Evo 3D back in the day, and I saw the screenshot over on Twitter showing that, and it was cool to experience that. I've got a couple captures somewhere in my file storage somewhere that I could put in a headset, but like unless it's really, really good quality, it's not fantastic. You don't want to come back to it. And the first reviewers, the first people who have actually seen this in headset, are saying that that capture kind of crosses that barrier. Is the way I'm understanding it, right?
Yeah, just to confirm with a lot of our commenters here that are asking, yes, it is just side by side 3D. This isn't some revolutionary technology. That's what was confirmed. So, CNET and TechRadar got to try this, and CNET said that it was undeniably vivid and the 3D was compellingly realistic. And to be clear, when I say try this, they were at a private Apple event. They were able to use the iPhone 15 Pro to capture videos and then watch those videos that they'd taken on the Vision Pro. And TechRadar said that the depth is interesting and not overbearing or jarring. Instead, the scene looks exactly as I remember it, complete with that lifelike depth. So again, it's nothing revolutionary, but it's just a lot what Apple does a lot of the time, taking an existing technology and polishing it and refining it and making it very consumer friendly. And obviously, you're viewing this on a headset with near 4K OLED micro displays, so you're not display or lens limited, because these are sharp pancake lenses in Vision Pro. And this is something where rather than juggling through separate apps and using, plugging in your 3D camera to USB and transferring it over to your headset, this is just you open it up and it's there. If you're using, that iCloud photo sync system that all Apple
And
products support.
yeah, so I'm seeing in our comments, James was asking whether I saw this. No, I did not. I reached out to Apple upon seeing that they had done this demo for, I think it was TechRadar and CNET, two very mainstream sort of tech publications with very wide audiences interested in their views. I put in our formal request for a review unit, should it come. And I'm just going to put it out there with our viewers that we don't know at this point which way that's going to go, whether we're going to go under embargo and have a review unit from Apple, or whether we're going to have to go through the purchase process just like everyone else and get one for ourselves and actually go through the demo process in stores when that happens, because that ultimately may be the way a lot of people experience this for the first time. And one of the questions here was from Chris saying, how will 3D capture work on iPhone with the camera so close? A fantastic question, an excellent question. And that is what we are hoping to see when we do these demos ourselves. What is that limitation? And what might change if you separate the distance between the lenses with the headset-based capture?
Yeah, you're not going to get the same depth that you get with a 3D camera that has a larger stereo separation. But again, this is why Apple is very kind of cleverly presenting it within this rectangular bound. This isn't like a 180-degree camera that surrounds you so that, if the sense of scale is off, it's going to look wrong. This is something that's being presented as like a window into a memory that doesn't have to have the true scale, but does have a strong sense of depth. Another commenter asked, how does it work given that these are very different cameras? They're different. One is a very wide angle. That's the software magic here, where Apple is doing some kind of distortion correction on the wider camera to pan it in. You cannot zoom in or out when you're capturing spatial video on iPhone 15 Pro. You're kind of locked to this one zoom level that is optimized for this correction algorithm. And just to confirm again, for some of the comments, we're not speculating on what this format is. Apple confirmed to TechRadar and CNET this is side by side video, 1080p, 30 FPS, and Apple actually published the specifications for this format. It's an extension of HEVC, that video compression format called MV-HEVC, multi-view HEVC. So this is no longer in the realm of speculation. It's confirmed what this is. It's side-by-side 1080p 30 FPS video.
Yeah, so Artful with that concerned reply about the idea that the Vision Pro might go to me or Kyle in the United States and we wouldn't get David Heaney's expert opinion if that happened. we are fully aware that the Vision Pro is a all hands on deck situation, and I personally would do whatever I could to make sure David Heaney's eyes got in front of that hardware as soon as possible. So that is something we have talked about and we're considering in our plans and we are discussing. So Artful, thank you for the thoughtful comment. We're considering it, and that is in our minds. Any other comments you want to get into before we move on?
No, I think we can talk about Visor now, the Immersed news that's just come in today.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got Renji Bejoy, the founder of Visor of Immersed, out there in our comments. I was talking to them a little while ago to try to get a little bit additional context for the story we just published. But why don't you just run us through what we just published, and I'll give that context after you get into that.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar, the idea behind Visor is that it's a single purpose headset, not designed to be a general purpose standalone headset that is like for gaming and social and everything. It's designed to show your laptop's monitor expanded into a massive floating screen in front of you and let you spawn extra free monitors. It basically turns your laptop into a multi-monitor setup of whatever size you want. That's the pitch. The news here today is that they are going to also have a standalone mode. So instead of having it to be powered by your laptop, it will also be able to have its own just web browsers that are floating in front of you. That's still not the primary use case. The primary use case for this is still to use it with your laptop as a virtual multi-monitor setup, but they will also have this standalone mode. They also say it's going to have a theater experience now, so it's not just productivity. The standalone mode will include the ability to stream movies, and they even said in the press release with friends, whatever that means. That suggests it's going to be some sort of multiplayer with avatar system. We haven't seen any details of that. There's also some minor hardware changes they've announced. They're adding more tracking cameras, so that there's 6 total now, and they're adding a touchpad to the side that can summon an AI assistant. So this is, it's difficult to know what to think on this one. This is not something we have tried yet. We would love to try it. Ian will talk a bit more about that in a second. But it's certainly an ambitious product. It's probably one of the most ambitious headsets we've ever seen presented. The legitimacy of this for me comes down to the fact that this is in partnership with Qualcomm and Intel. And Qualcomm seems to be doing a lot of the work here. I can't speculate beyond that, but I think Qualcomm is doing a lot more than the fact that this is branded Immersed Visor may suggest, is all I would say here. So that's what seems to give it legitimacy. But for this thing to ship with all of these specs and all of these features, and now standalone as well, with 4K OLED microdisplays, it stretches credibility, is what I would say.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of people in our comments responding to that, our presentation of this, and I want to make sure we're fair and really present the whole picture here. I'm seeing Guy Godin saying how many of those things are wish list items and how many are implemented and working today. That's the real question. We do not have our eyes into this headset, and that makes us draw comparisons to big screen beyond. It makes us point out that we have put big screen on our heads for extended periods of time and reviewed it. It's on our site. And in addition to that, we also tried the Beyond very early. We met with the CEO there, the founder, and tried a very early kit of the demo, wrote about that as well. We haven't done the same for here. So there's a lot of there's a lot of concern out there in our audience as they are taking these refundable pre-orders. We reached out to Renji and asked about this specifically, about us comparing this to Big Screen Beyond and understanding what the difference is here. And the way Renji presents it is there's 2 different paths to market here. And Renji is saying that they basically need permission from some of the partners before UploadVR and others can see this. So these companies are at different stages of their journey in hardware. And Renji is saying that because Big Screen is solo, quote, they don't need permission from anyone. So that's him explaining why we're not able to have that assessment for you yet. Renji adding, but the trade-off is them not having experience bringing hardware to market, whereas these partners have built high-quality products at scale. I, whether fortunate or unfortunately, decided to go the partner route to ensure a great end product. Hopefully, can have you all come in the next few months here. So that's the promise right now of a timeline of some sorts to actually go and see this. But that's where we are today, and that's the full picture I wanted to get across to people. I haven't seen what the comments are doing. Anything interesting there?
Yeah, we do have Ranji in the comments saying that people can wait. They don't have to believe right now. I've seen some people accuse this of being a scam or something like that. And, to be clear, Immersed is saying that this is a fully refundable deposit, i.e., you do not get charged until your headset is shipped, or, you are fully refunded if you want to cancel before your headset is shipped. Now, that's obviously a claim they're making. I'm pretty sure they would get into legal trouble if that was false. So I don't see how it could be a scam in that sense, because it's not one of those things where, it's not like Kickstarter where you're putting in your money and you might lose it. According to Immersed, these
And
are fully refundable pre-orders.
and Immersed is a real product. Like that's for people that are like flying by this, not realizing that there's something behind this. Immersed is a product that is in use today by people in our audience, I'm sure, that let them access their PCs and multiple monitors. So like this is a thing in market, and in the same way Big Screen is in market in its own social platform, going into hardware. That's why it invites these comparisons to Big Screen. Is they are parallel, similar companies trying to enhance their core experience through hardware. And yeah, Intel and Qualcomm are major partners, and Qualcomm in particular puts out reference designs all the time. We're going to move into the back end of the show here. We're going to start talking about 2024 overall. Like there's a lot of things happening in 2024, and this is just one possible route. But Qualcomm, we have to come back to Qualcomm as the engine of so many things happening in the XR space, and their partners. Like it's really up to Qualcomm in some instances whether to say something, and in other instances it's the partner. It's literally a contractual obligation amongst mega corporations saying this. Who gets to say when this thing gets announced, and that's what I would expect here. But like that doesn't that gives strength to why we haven't seen this yet. But at the same time, Qualcomm has a lot of other partners to think about too. So if you're getting ready to spend your money, we're going to talk about other news here today of why you kind of should be waiting right now if you're in anything else other than the market for a Quest 3, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we should point out that Qualcomm has not only made just reference designs. We have seen in the past Qualcomm reference designs that look strangely like this. And Qualcomm is not just wanting to be the chip provider these days. They are providing, designs, electrical engineering support, even software. We've seen some headsets that are shipping with Qualcomm tracking, and I think that with this, Qualcomm is heavily involved in some of that core tech, like the tracking. Qualcomm is trying to spur a market where they want to help hardware companies be able to ship headsets and start a competitive market here. And it looks like Immersed is one of the companies that's starting to build on this. I think even like HTC's first standalone headset, the tracking, the Focus One, the tracking was literally just Qualcomm's out of the box tracking. Uh, a lot of that core tech. We've even seen, Qualcomm has a developer SDK that their Snapdragon Spaces that they are bringing on the content level. This is not like most of the smartphone market where Qualcomm is only on the very low chip level. In XR, Qualcomm wants to be providing a huge range of these tool sets to allow companies that are even like a software startup to jump into the arena.
So Renji in our comments here saying the difference between Immersed partnerships with Qualcomm versus others who use the chip is that Immersed actually co-develops with Qualcomm. We don't just consume the chip. And then Guy Godin earlier in our comments was saying Big Screen shipped a headset that they built and engineered themselves. Guy Godin, of course, the creator of Virtual Desktop. And Guy adding, I wouldn't compare the two until a working unit ships to consumers. And we are not. We are, you know, I didn't ask David Heaney before this moment what his thoughts on this are, so we're going to hear from him fresh. But I would not personally put my money into a pre-order of Visor right now. That would be, and I think Renji, like anyone in our comments, your own call to make, and I imagine Renji would support people who aren't ready to do that right now. There's going to be early adopters who are ready to take that early support risk. But that would be my personal take on this. David Heaney, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think I need to see someone outside of the company trying and reviewing and giving impressions, someone that I trust, ideally us, but even just someone I trust. But again,
Deal your own eyeballs. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I get that.
but I still do think, assuming that the fully refundable thing is true, which, as I said earlier, I assume they would get into deep legal trouble if it wasn't true. This isn't like a quick starter. I just want to keep repeating that. This is not a gamble. They are saying that it's fully refundable. So maybe I'm too trustworthy on that,
Yeah.
but I do trust them on that.
So there's Renji going off my comments there. And that's, this is the same confidence that we heard from Big Screen prior to them shipping Big Screen. So there is similarity there, but remember what he said there, that we need to go eyes in. Renji's telling us it's a couple months away. And Renji in our comments is basically supporting that. If you don't have confidence in it, just wait. And that's where we are on it right now. And I think it's ready to move on. That's, like, if you don't think that was balanced, I don't know. That's us being as balanced as we possibly can. And I hope you appreciate it in our audience. We're trying our best here.
I think the last thing I would say about this is that if it does ship as described, this is a fascinating product, and I want to see more headsets that are designed around specific use cases, because the problem with the general headsets, be it Quest 3, be it even Vision Pro at its $3,500, is when you try to do everything, you're going to have to add a lot of bulk and weight to do everything. And if you want this use case of just being able to be a kind of digital nomad, or someone that's just constantly traveling for work and have a massive multi-monitor setup anywhere you go, if this is as described, this is going to be what you want. You're not going to want to put a brick on your face when you can put a visor. So, if this does ship as described, this should be very interesting for people who want that use case.
Yeah, very, very interesting work that we are desperate to see more of. I think that's the way we'll leave off that subject. And yeah, I'm seeing James saying I pre-order all hardware from everyone in the XR space. Yeah, I'm sorry for you, James. Let's move on to HTC sending a Vive Focus 3 to the International Space Station. Do you think it gets more use up there than most Vive Focus 3s do down on Earth?
Well, Vive Focus 3 is HTC's business-focused headset. So they're using, it's not a matter of whether they want to. This is a headset that people are using in business and enterprise contexts. The kind of, not gimmick, but the unique feature of Focus 3 is that the battery in the rear can be swapped out, not hot swapped, but just swapped out. So you don't have to charge the headset between usage. You can just kind of swap that battery out, and they sell like a charging cradle, so you can have multiple batteries ready to go. It's also one of the highest resolution headsets there is. It's higher resolution than Quest 3 or Pico 4. It has 2.5K per eye LCDs, and it launched in 2021. So the Focus 3 does have its own use case and niche. I think the interesting thing about what they're doing here is that they're sending it to the ISS to help with astronaut mental health. The idea is that, up there, you're in a very cramped and unnatural environment. You don't see the normal sights of Earth. You don't see a natural daylight sky. And the pitch HTC and their partners that are working on this are making, I think it's XR Health and Nordstrom, is that it will help astronauts have a little bit of escapism sometimes. The problem is that the way they're doing this is through 360-degree videos. I think they really could have, I guess if you're trying to represent Earth on a headset that only has the original XR2, that's one of the ways to go. But it would be great to see in the future this be tried with a Vision Pro, or maybe a Quest 3 with very, very well optimized software that maybe uses like photogrammetry or other nerf capture tools to deliver something that's sixed off. But to talk more generally about this, in the long term, this could be a crucial part of how astronauts travel into deep space. NASA is now in the middle of spooling up its Artemis program to send humans to the moon, and its stated goal is to establish a base on the moon. Its stated, long-term goal and going into the next program is to send humans to Mars, which is going to be a multi-month mission, completely isolated from all of humanity. So if astronauts could take a headset on these missions and have a personal theater that they can sit and watch, a whole library of movies and TV shows, and they can go into this immersive virtual environment and kind of, de-stress a bit and kind of escape, this could be something that's essential to all deep space missions in the late 2020s and 2030s.
Yeah, I'm seeing people in the comments talking about how the idea that tracking systems would likely need to be modified in order to work in space. And I'm seeing VR Gamer Dude talk about the Enterprise D having a holodeck, and that is the model. I've talked about it so many times in my head of the kind of VR future I want. I like this idea of going into a room and speaking a couple sentences and then modifying it until it's this environment you want. And that sounds like amazing. It's really, really cool to think that VR could actually fulfill that need. And it's actually like, when you think about it, like, what's the format of messages like, how do you send messages to someone in a VR headset in space who's living back on planet Earth? It goes to what we were discussing earlier with the Vision Pro's 3D format. And gosh, I'm going to go full circle back to my 2012 2013 article with a guy at NASA who went and eventually worked for Apple, telling me that the TV was the right format for the moon landing, and it's not the right format now. And I love this idea that we could go full circle one day and eventually use VR headsets to see what people out there are doing in space.
Yeah, seeing a lot of comparisons here to the holodeck, it does seem like, the obvious, in science fiction in many ways describes the future of technology. And, they had that understanding in Star Trek that there would be this need for escapism on deep space missions. I'm seeing a lot of people ask how the tracking works. And the answer is it didn't without modification. So HTC actually had to redesign the tracking system to use a controller. This is a test on a parabolic aircraft. What do they call them? The vomit comet, where you kind of go up and sink down to experience microgravity for a short amount of time to test this. How it works is that one of the controllers is placed down in a fixed position as an anchor, and the headset uses that as a reference point because it no longer does have a up down vector from gravity that's reliable in microgravity. So that is how they solved this. The same thing had to be done when an Oculus Rift was sent to the ISS in 2017. Microsoft also sent a original HoloLens to the ISS in 2015, and again they had to modify the tracking system. So the answer to how does tracking work in space is it doesn't without heavy modification, but any company that sends a headset up to space does that modification because it has to be done.
It's really interesting to think about. My mind's exploding with ideas now, but like it's wild to think that, like, hypothetically you could full body track the astronauts and use a model of the ISS and then basically let you go inside the ISS and see the astronauts doing all of their actual movements around you in 3D space. Kind of cool to think that we could be there in just a few years.
Yeah, there could be an extension to that app on Quest. I think it's called Mission ISS, which lets you, it's a fully volumetric 3D app that you can explore the ISS. It's really fascinating. If anyone hasn't heard of it and that's something you're interested in, look it up, Mission ISS.
One thing I will mention, I'm seeing someone in the comments here, a little scampy. Anyone know if Apple's ever sent something to the ISS? It's a really interesting question. I would assume wearables, like, are a category that you would be allowed. I don't know how that would work. So that's a fascinating question. But I will say, towards questions earlier, it takes years to go through the certification process of getting something to go up there. That's why you would see something like a Vive Focus 3 rather than their newer headset like an XR Elite. It takes a very long time to actually do that process. And it's true of some of the capture technology they've sent up there. So if you think about Apple announcing Vision Pro now, getting its spatial video up and running on the iPhone, they're in a place where they actually might be interested in talking to companies that are sending stuff up in more robust ways. There's already great like screensavers and things like that Apple has on its platform where there's obvious room for expansion. I think we're ready to move on.
Yeah, let's talk about Banter. So I'll let you take this topic as you were in there checking it out.
Yeah, so Banter is from SideQuest. It's their social VR networking service. And I don't know if we've got Shane Harris from SideQuest in our comments or not, but I've been chatting with him a little bit. I met him at MetaConnect, talked to him briefly right before I had a meeting scheduled with the Walkout Mini Golf folks and had to say goodbye. And then he reaches out to me and says, can you go check out Banter? Okay, I'm going to put something on your calendar for tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I go to work, or I walk my kid to school, walk back to work here at home, and put on the VR headset. And the first thing I do is I try to install SideQuest, which was an idiotic thing to do. I wasted a good 10 minutes there because Banter doesn't require SideQuest. It's an App Lab app. So I searched and got the App Lab link for this, installed it, and was up met him in maybe 5 minutes from install. It was very, very quick. So this is the actual timeline of what happened that day. I had a meeting at 8:30 scheduled by Shane Harris in this guerrilla style, just put onto my calendar. Please don't do that. I know Shane Harris, so it was acceptable for him to do that on my calendar. I don't like that from random PR folks. Um, but he does that. I meet him. A few minutes pass, and I'm like, this is interesting. I'd like to invite David Heaney in here. So David over here has turned in one of the stories I think we're going to talk to later, and he's like, can you edit this? And I'm telling him I'm in VR right now with Shane Harris of SideQuest, and he's showing me Banter. Can you check this out? Because he has a version. He has me in a room that looks very similar to the room I'm in right now. There's 3 cameras over here, and he's showing me that you can just press 1, 2, 3 on the desktop client of Banter and switch between the 3 camera views. There's also a browser in there to throw videos, just like we have Stevie the TV. I was impressed because I have you, David Heaney, in the studio in the past, appealing to this audience right here, saying, if someone can build this, it actually takes a lot off of your plate, and you would welcome it. So I'm like, okay, this is looking good enough to have David come check it out. And he replies, fine. I love it. He's just fine. I'll check it out. Right at like 8:54 in the morning. At 9 o'clock, he says he's installed it and he's in. And within 1 minute later, we were in the room together with Shane Harris, and he's looking at a studio. It's just like this. I had to tell David that I would only take 10 minutes of his time. So he says he's in at 9 o'clock, and I am editing that story. We're going to talk. I've done my job. He's asked Banter. He's asked Shane Harris the question I expected him to ask, and that was, are you trying to build VRChat? And the answer that I've just reported is a resounding yes. They're trying to do a VRChat on Quest that runs Performant, which is one of the key problems with VRChat because it's extended across both the PC and Quest ecosystems. Now, it could also become a problem with Banter over time. There's no proof that they're actually going to succeed at this, but there's actually quite a bit in this platform that looked really interesting just from the offset. And this 10-minute thing of just getting David interested, getting him installed, it was a 150 megabyte download. So he went and installed it, and he had it really fast. And that's critical in VR. Now, we can debate. I'm sure it's in our comments. David, I'm curious what your thoughts on it were, and what context I haven't brought here. But how excited should our audience be that there is a competitor for VRChat, a new one?
So I think if you're someone who doesn't use PC VR, you don't own a gaming PC, this should be interesting to you because VRChat is a PC first platform that happens to support mobile. You know, if you're a VRChat user, you'll know that you have this content that's on PC only. So there are worlds that you cannot access. And as I commonly point out in this show, a lot of the best stuff you see in VRChat marketed on Twitter and YouTube and other social media platforms is all captured on PC, and a lot of those are the PC worlds. And then you join your Quest, and it doesn't look anything like that, and you can't access those worlds. And if there are versions, they're dumbed down. Banter is standalone first. There is no distinction between PC worlds and Quest worlds. And when I tried it, the performance was excellent. One of the things I was really surprised by was, given the complexity of the worlds that were there, given the graphics, given that they have full physics in the same sense as Boneworks, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, audience, but is the first time this has been done in a networked environment. That's something we've been talking about for a long time on the show. When will someone deliver Boneworks-like physics in a networked environment? This is going to have a very interesting effect on the social VR market once they graduate from App Lab to the main store. So, yeah, again, it really does depend on whether if you're a PC gamer and you use VRChat on PC, this isn't going to really be the biggest appeal to you. But if you're someone who's on standalone, you hate that every time you go into VRChat, it's 40 frames per second and you can't see half the avatars and you can't access some of the best worlds, this is going to be potentially a social VR game changer for you.
Yeah, very interesting. And I basically left it this way with Shane, that we're moving towards the end of the year here. So we've got a lot of things on our plate to take care of. We've got big reviews and our end of the year sort of wrap ups as we look towards next year. And so I don't know when we're going to get into that studio and run a test, but I would like to very, very soon. I've got ideas, but it was pretty impressive that they had this up and running, at least to the scale we were looking at it. And I'm curious if anyone in our comments goes and downloads Banter, gives it a run. Let us know what your experience was next week on the show. We'd love to hear how it worked out for you. Those first impressions matter. I saw someone here saying they tried VRChat on Quest 1, and that sounds like a bad time. I don't know if there's anything else to talk about on this subject.
Yeah, I don't think so. Only just ET2K9 now asks, Bone Lab doesn't have Boneworks physics. I don't think Bone Lab is multiplayer, unless I'm completely my brain is broken.
I don't think
No.
I don't think I think they talked about that, right? I think that's one of the things on their list. But interesting question from James asking about normal VR. That's a really interesting question for SideQuest. I should ask them. As I recall, SideQuest had some projects before SideQuest that they might have brought forward and evolved into this, but that's something we're gonna have to get into. We'll keep our eyes on this, and yeah, like we said, we're curious what our audience thinks as they get into it.
Yeah, I think I remember that before SideQuest, their first project was a kind of metaverse style app. So this may be just a return to what their original vision was, rather than some completely separate new idea.
Yeah,
let's
and
talk
people
about
are adding that
Pico.
mods are adding those sorts of things on Boneworks.
Yeah, I think
you ready to talk about Pico?
I think on PC, yes, but to be clear, we're talking about we're talking about Banter being the first one that's on standalone multiplayer and full physics in all three in one package. As far as I'm aware, it is the first to have done that. But yes, let's talk about Pico.
Yeah.
So yeah, Pico.
Yeah, you want to just go into it?
Yeah, I was just going to say Pico has reportedly, or sorry, not reportedly, we've confirmed that they have cancelled their in development Beat Saber competitor and laid off all the staff. And that game was called Blitz Rhythm. And I've heard from a few people that were that spoke to a beta tester that said that they thought it was a great game. They really enjoyed beta testing it. They thought it was great. They really thought this was going to be a reason that people would no longer say, "Oh, I don't want a Pico 4 because I can't play Beat Saber." But Pico has cancelled it. So
yeah, as what I've understood is that it was understood internally at Pico to be as the Beat Saber killer. That's what they thought of it as, which is a hard label for anyone external to Pico to throw at the thing, because because Beat Saber is such a monstrously large place in the rhythm game market now. Anything dethroning it is a hard ask. One of the things that we understand about this product was going to be attached to a motion tracker that Pico was planning, and then you would get full body tracking and be able to have a real dance game um, out of this experience alongside their other exclusive content like Just Dance. Now, Just Dance, we've reached out to the developer there, Ubisoft, to see if we could find out whether that game is ever going to see the light of day on Pico or another platform. But I think the idea that VR platforms want to unlock full body tracking for dance games so that players don't need to learn how to saber well, or punch in rhythm. Like there's plenty of existing dance games that could get so much better with really great foot tracking and leg tracking. And it's this category of content that is it's just embarrassing how small it is ultimately. Like as everyone that thinks that Beat Saber, it's silly that Beat Saber has been at the top of the market for all these years. I think it's silly that there aren't more games at the top of the market because of just how critical dancing is to people. It's such a big category, and Pico had a real opportunity to stand out here, and that is a massively missed opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we may probably see more of those kind of games as the inside out upper body tracking comes to Quest 3 and some of those generative AI legs. But let's relate this to the Pico news we talked about last week. And Jay Ritchie is asking if this was because of trouble with music licenses. I mean, no, it's clear that from what happened last week, and now with this, it's even more clear to me that Pico is pulling out of the Quest like VR gaming market. That is no longer their focus. It looks like if you relate this to the news we talked about last week, that Pico is keeping its hardware and hardware R&D department, but essentially all of their content people are either laid off or folded back into ByteDance. It's clear that that's what's going to happen here. That Pico has been told to build the kind of headsets that people will want in the later half of the decade. Start to build Vision Pro competitors and the headsets that are much more advanced than today, but that their short-term aspirations of competing heavily and investing heavily to try and win the current market, they just don't see it as big enough for them, and they don't see it as viable enough anywhere near. This is, to me, I was very confused about what was going on at Pico until this news, and hearing this news, it's crystal clear now. That you don't cancel this. You don't cancel this and lay off all the staff if you're still intending to compete in the short-term VR gaming market.
Yeah, the short-term VR gaming market. I there is a piece of hand tracking that we have to get into in a couple episodes. We'll get it. We've gone into it a little bit in the past, but um, platforms like Meta did a lot of funding experimentation in mixed reality. But when I talk to developers like the developers at Alchemy, Andrew over there, the head of Alchemy at Google right now, and I think about the forward facing platform features on Quest Pro, which is a dual mode way of having both hand tracking and controller tracking at the same time. Um, when you say Pico is pulling the rug out of gaming, I still think they can, if they wanted to, throw money back into VR gaming, but at hand tracked VR games. Now, I've I listened back on our previous show and I fact checked myself on whether I can count on my hands the number of developers who can make great hand tracking games. And it still is, it stands up. There aren't a ton of developers who can put great hand tracking games together. And we know Meta is ready to pay for those games on its platform. We know Google has that expertise in house at Alchemy and could stand up a platform hypothetically with hand tracking. But this, I can't imagine how Pico goes and matches efforts of that scale. How do they get devs to come and build hand tracking games for Pico or TikTok VR, if that's how they come back, when this is the reality of what happened to the previous generation of games made for the platform?
I would guess they're just hoping to ride off the titles that come to other platforms, like Samsung's platform, like Apple's headset. I guess if you look at the context that they're keeping hardware but folding away the software, you could even speculate it might be possible that Pico plans to adopt Google's platform. That's a big stretch, but I just, if they don't have the software
Yeah.
team anymore and they don't have the content team, you can't compete in the market in the short term without that. You can't. What is the solution there? There's something. They either just don't care, and their current solution is the market now is too small. We don't care. Just build us good hardware that we can worry about the content in the second half of the decade, or they're going to get a partner to do that for them.
Well, I think it's fairly interesting to me the timing of VRChat coming to Pico, almost parallel to all the Pico falling apart as a brand. All of these layoffs and the idea that they're shifting directions in an entirely different way. Of course, VRChat supports dual mode input. They do in their experimental sort of way have hand tracking support inside the platform, and it's actually pretty cool. I've done reports with people who know sign language to test out the quality of hand tracking on Quest inside VRChat, and through that reporting discovered that there is a menu option inside VRChat to turn off all of the gesture recognition so that you can sign more freely without activating the gestures to move around in VR. So there's actually, if you're going to support one game, one product on your platform with hand tracking, they do have the right one, don't they?
Sure, but the one thing is they don't support hand tracking on Pico 4. Pico 4 has hand tracking, but I opened up VRChat on Pico 4 and the first thing it said was put on your controllers, and I took off the controllers when I was in the game and nothing, there's clearly no hand tracking there. I suspect, that it does seem like a massive missed opportunity, but I suspect VRChat was working on this for a long, long time and they had no idea what was going on, and that ByteDance made this decision without ever informing any of their partners. Because I think
that would be brutal. That would be brutal if that isn't covered. Hand tracking support isn't covered in that agreement. If that wasn't part of bringing VRChat to Pico, then that's either a dead end. That's hypothetically a dead end for VRChat on the Pico platform, or like, I mean, what else? Like, I don't know if
it could be coming in a future update.
Yeah, it needs to be coming, right? It's either contractually obligated or like they're gonna support the transition, I guess, over to whatever Pico does next. But it's the comment from James O'Loughlin. Where was it? A little bit higher. Devs don't invest in hand tracking because it is still a secondary input modality to controllers. That is something I've heard from some of the most invested people in this space. You simply cannot, as a game developer, build for the second input system for a platform and hope for a great market. There's a long track record of your products failing if you do that. And so until these platforms say and make this painful shift over, actually we're hand tracking first, then all of this stuff is added later, and it's a problem for so many devs. But it's just, all of the devs right now are really, really good at making hand controller tracking games, and some of them are going to work, but some of them are just not going to work, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah, it just does depend on how many headsets ship without it. We know Apple is not going to have controllers. It's been speculated, and we'll talk about this later, that Samsung may not have controllers. It's just that when does it get to a critical mass where a developer is missing out on a significant enough chunk of the market to not support hand tracking that they have to, or if they don't want to, that they have to kind of de-scope their game, because you can't have the same budget as a title that's supporting 100% of the market if you're supporting a chunk, and that's just the unfortunate reality here. But do we want to talk about the Valve news?
Yeah, why don't we run through Valve's hints at its VR plans, and then I'm going to go check on my cat and my door while you talk about that, because they are not happy that I'm in VR right now. Be right back.
Sure. So this was in an interview with Norm from Tested. You should go and watch the full interview. We've linked to it in our article, or you can just search for it on YouTube. And so they were asked, Valve was asked by Norm, how much of the learnings from the Steam Deck project could eventually be transferred over to hardware more suitable for VR, presumably a VR headset. Valve said a lot of it. Working with an APU with miniaturization of computers, We don't have anything to announce today in terms of VR other than that we are still working on VR and we're still pushing forward on it. But just like Steam Deck is a result of learning a bunch of stuff from Steam Controller and Steam Link and VR, future products will continue to learn from everything we've done from Steam Deck as well. That's what one of the Valve staff said. The other said, obviously, there is a lot of overlap. Technology pieces that we can reuse. Wireless streaming, for example, is very applicable to VR. That benefited Steam Deck as well, improving the wireless streaming experience. But also just establishing relationships with part suppliers and other hardware partners. The Steam Deck team and the VR team, we work together. So there's a lot of inoculation of ideas and parts and technologies. Following this, Norm asked about that inoculation of ideas and parts and technologies. And Norm asked, is it fair to say that Valve is all in on OLED? Obviously, Norm here was trying to get a hint from Valve about whether its next headset would use OLED. But unfortunately, the Valve employee did not take the bait, and they simply said, for Steam Deck, for sure, yes. So we didn't get any confirmation about OLED. What you do see in that quote, though, is a clear reference to wireless streaming technology. That clearly indicates to me that whatever Valve's next headset will do will have a strong focus on wireless streaming from your PC. And while that could take the form of virtual desktop or Airlink style streaming that goes through your home network, maybe this is wishful thinking, but I suspect that Valve is not going to put up with that level of variability of quality with home networks. I think Valve, and again, this is speculation, just based on my kind of gut maybe, I think Valve is going to give us an adapter, something that plugs in either to USB or even into the display port of your PC and then sends that signal wirelessly to the headset in a way where they control the hardware end to end and it's in direct line of sight, perhaps even 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6E so that there's not interference with your existing network. And I think they're going to try to deliver a better wireless streaming experience than what we've seen yet from any of the other solutions.
Geek Odin and some of our commenters sort of pushing back at that idea. Oh, the solved problem from 2017.
So that's a reference to a Gabe Newell quote where in 2017, Newell said that wireless VR was a solved problem and would be part of all headsets by 2018. It was something along those lines. And then, of course, in 2019, Valve ships a fully tethered headset with no wireless adapter. So that was one of Gabe Newell's.
And ironically, yeah, like that was parallel to the idea. I remember being at conferences and feeling the hype. Like I talked to the developers of some of those wireless technologies, and they recognized it's once you go wireless, you never want to go back. But they were building technologies that were doubling the cost of your investment in various ways. Like not doubling, but when you add the PC, it's that way, right? You add the PC, you add the extra transmitter, it gets up into significantly added cost in order to go from a wired solution to a wireless, or go from a wireless standalone solution to a wired one, or like to a wireless PC one, right? That's the one we ended up with that like won out in the market. That's what Geek Odin's solution in our comments is like the winner was standalone first and then wireless PC VR streaming as an add-on solution. And a lot of those wireless solutions, there's some in our comments, I use some of them, but it's so far from a solved problem, right? It's
we have people in our comments saying, on Quest 3 this is a solved problem, and James O'Loughlin saying really better than virtual desktop. If you have virtual desktop set up with a Wi-Fi 6E router that's in the same room as you and everything is wired to your, from your PC to the router, there's probably not anything Valve can do to magically get better. The problem is that's not what most people's setup is. And we need to be honest about this. And I feel like sometimes we're the only people that are honest about this. Most people have an ISP supplied router that probably is Wi-Fi 5 and it's 3 rooms down the hallway with 2 thick walls in between. And when they try to use wireless VR, I'm told by people this all the time. You can talk to people in VRChat and in other VR platforms that will tell you that this is their experience. They try it and it's a stuttery mess because they do not have an ideal setup. the dedicated hardware means that you don't have to worry about what is someone's home networking setup. You don't have to worry about, are there 25 other devices running on this, the cheapest possible hardware that the ISP could ship to this person. You have a dedicated link from the transmitter to the headset, in line of sight, in the room. No need to support every possible Wi-Fi configuration. You bypass all of that. So that's what I think Valve could do. It's kind of what you saw with the AirBridge from Meta. The problem is, well, from D-Link, the problem is that, it wasn't really seamless. It didn't have 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6E. It was just standard 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6. And it's only available in the US, I believe, as well. So, that's very different from something that's officially supported plug and play Wi-Fi 6E, designed for the headset by the actual company that makes the headset. And as far as I'm aware, it's also not, the AirBridge doesn't work on Quest Pro or Quest 3, though we haven't tried that yet on Quest 3.
Now, let me take a step back and just, this if we're going to follow your line of thinking of this add-on, why can't I mod my index with that add-on?
Well, because you would essentially have to put a standalone computer in. The index would need a battery, and a chipset that can do the decoding, because the reason that this can be done in standalone headsets is they have a chipset that's capable of doing video decoding in the same way that they would stream wireless video from YouTube 360 or whatever. It's the same kind of decoding, except they're using it for the actual iBuffer frames. So by having a headset with this capability, it's built in. But I think this raises the more interesting question. James O'Loughlin's pointing out there is a device for that coming out supposedly sometime soon. Nofio, I think it's like $300 or something like that. Don't quote me, but that's the thing. You have to essentially build all of the computing hardware on there. But it raises the question: will this be Valve's main focus, streaming from a PC with Steam VR installed, running a desktop GPU, or will this thing have some sort of standalone functionality? I think that's something that is still the biggest unanswered question about this next headset from Valve. My guess is that they will not focus on standalone gaming, because that would mean having to either wait for a chip powerful enough to run PC VR, or have this separate section of Steam, or a separate kind of labeling system for games that have been scaled down. I don't think that's going to be their focus. I think they want to deliver high fidelity VR that's using a PC.
Yeah, and the idea that I'm really excited about is the idea of bringing Steam Deck quite literally into VR, and the idea that you could perhaps have a next generation of the remote play functionality out of Steam, and you could have a lot of really great experiences just by having your Steam Deck screen shared in VR with a friend who has come to see what game you're playing, or for you to jump in and play together. It would be a full circle, pretty big win for Valve if they nailed that experience out of the box with whatever platform. I mean, I can imagine a lot of gamers turning off overnight any of their interest in the Meta platform. If Valve really came out and said you can play, I don't know, what are some cool games that people really love that run well on Steam Deck? Let's say Portal 2. If you could play Portal 2's cooperative mode side by side with a friend, and you're looking over at them, and you're playing on two giant screens right next to each other, that'd be a fantastic, amazing experience. But I have to imagine that Valve must be at least thinking about it, if not actually delivering, because that would be an amazing feature for me.
I would go further and say that's almost certain to be a feature of their next headset if it has onboard compute. Yes, that you would be able to stream regular games from your Steam Deck. To be clear to the commenters here, we're not talking about the Steam Deck powering VR. The Steam Deck is not powerful enough to run the vast majority of content on Steam VR. People have tried it. There are people who have tried to use Steam Deck to power Quest via Link with Windows, or they've also tried to just use Steam VR. There are a lot of projects for this. This is a device with a laptop, a sort of mid-tier laptop level GPU. It is not powerful enough for the vast majority of PC VR. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about seeing a virtual rectangular giant cinema screen in front of you that you're playing your regular games on in this headset. So it's essentially giving you a massive, massive screen to portably play your deck. So maybe you're going on a trip or holiday, you bring your deck, you bring your headset. Instead of having to be just playing portably, you're playing the same games at full giant monitor scale.
Yeah, that's what I want, and it's really interesting to think about how we've watched Apple and Google sort of get its uh, system in order to run all of their flat screen apps in their platform, and Valve is this dark horse as it's always been, like just people not paying attention to the value of the Steam platform if they really just add a few more things on there for developers. So I'm excited about those ideas, and we really need to see what Valve is working on. They've been in the lab for many years, and cannot wait to see what's next from them. You ready to talk about what's next?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a few comments there. Geldon Niche is saying that they run VR off a cell phone processor on a Quest. Yeah, of course it's possible. The problem is that would mean that all of the Steam VR content would have to then either get an ultra low graphics mode or an entirely separate version that's just designed for this headset. It would be essentially Valve would have to make a separate section of Steam or even a separate Steam store. It would be a nightmare. It would be a dilution from their core brand of delivering high fidelity VR. I don't expect it to happen, but perhaps it would. And James O'Loughlin is saying that, so essentially Index 2 has a built-in battery and video decoding chips and wireless built for PC wireless streaming. Yeah, I would expect that. I would expect it has a full-fledged XR2, be that Gen 1 or 2, or, likely 2 processor, that it can do all of this tracking on board, just like Quest does. That it probably even lets you, run Linux applications natively without a PC and float them in midair, like browser windows and YouTube, just like these things we're seeing on Quest 3 and Vision Pro, but from Steam OS Linux rather than Android or Vision OS. And then yes, the core focus for gaming is using your existing powerful gaming PC.
Yeah, and a Free Sky saying Steam doesn't have a standalone store, though. That is absolutely correct, and we don't expect that to be the route that they go. They need to bring all of Steam's content, which includes perhaps even workshop content, over to a VR platform that works a little bit better than the current system. I'm seeing people going crazy with the Portal 2 VR mod, and that's again what we think about. But we don't want to confuse anything here. We want to be clear that one of the things that could be really compelling here would just be having your flat screen games in VR with other people ready to watch games with you, play games with you. We want to see that on a flat screen done in a really great way. And Meta's getting close with Xbox streaming, but it's still not what Valve could bring to offer if they really get all their technologies together.
Yeah, it would be much more. It would be a lot better than cloud streaming. It would be on your local network without any of the kind of issues there. Just to be clear on this, the reason that Steam Deck can play most games on Steam is that it has an 800p screen. It is using like half or less of the pixels than when you're playing on your 1080p monitor. So it has half of the performance requirement. That trick doesn't work for VR. The headset not being tethered to your PC doesn't mean that you want to see any lower resolution. You can't play these same Steam VR games just at lower resolution. It would look horrible. So you can't use the same trick that Steam Deck be able to play everything on Steam to play everything on Steam VR.
But for that same restriction means that you could bring that screen into VR with less hardware as like a streaming solution, and you've got I'm absolutely convinced as soon as you start feeling like your phone is really with you in VR, your Steam Deck, your Switch, your even the PlayStation Portal device that just launched over on Sony's platform, when you have access to these devices in VR and they have an actual user interface that feels snappy to use with them, it's going to open a lot of minds, and you're just not going to want to go without this portable screen sitting in your place a lot of the times. There's so much you can do with it. I'm ready to be Link from the latest games with the little pad on my side all the time, so I can use that for VR. Let's talk about Quest Casting 2.0. This one was a big one you noticed. Lets creators capture uncropped widescreen footage break this down for people why it's a big deal.
This is a huge deal for YouTubers and other such content creators who want to capture Quest. Before this, if you are wanting to record videos of what you're seeing inside your Quest, you have to choose between the native square aspect ratio, which is shown in blue on the screen here, or you can, if you want widescreen, it works by simply cropping the view and recording from this crop. That's because the aspect ratio of each lens in a VR headset is roughly 1:1. You know, the field of view is roughly the same monocularly horizontal as it is vertical. So you get, it's not a widescreen field of view, so you don't get a widescreen view. So that obviously has huge issues for content creators because you miss out on often the time where your hands are in the bottom third of the screen. And sometimes if you're very close to enemies, this isn't a great example, but imagine you were kind of lower, you'd miss out on the head. You also miss out on this guy's weapon, for example. It really does lose out, especially in cockpit games. You know, I watched a lot of footage that people uploaded of Warplanes World War II when it was released, and you're literally missing out on seeing the cockpit because it's down here. So this Casting 2.0 is part of the Meta Quest Developer Hub PC app for Windows and Mac. You can't do it natively on the headset. You have to have this connected by USB 3.0. I suspect it's the computer itself doing the actual recording in some way, though it's unclear what the exact technical nature of this is. But essentially what happens is you can then get, what happens is you enable this, the current app has to be restarted because the headset will now render beyond what you're actually seeing in VR. You can't see out to the tops and the sides here in the headset, but it is rendering it so that it can be captured to look better for people watching on YouTube. So this is no longer going to have that kind of overly cropped, zoomed in look and widescreen Quest footage. And as you can see here, you know, you can see the full arm and what's being held. You can see up to the sky. You can see the sides. This is going to be a game changer for conveying what it feels like you're seeing in VR to a audience on platforms like YouTube.
It's interesting to think that the sides actually show you a little bit of what you can't see. And so if you're doing a shooter game capture, for instance, you might actually be able to show people running in off screen that you can't actually see in VR, which would be an interesting little like change in the way you convey the stress of a scene to your viewers if you're capturing that way. I'm seeing VR Gamer Dude saying that they're testing out FPS, 60 FPS in headset, which would be another major win if we're able to get that really solid combined with this.
Yeah, that looks to be rolling out for the in-headset recording feature for some people as a test, because it was normally either, I think it was 32 and 16 or something like that. It's very low frame rate. But yeah, it seems to be rolling out slowly to a few limited testers. But yeah, again, the limitation here is that this needs to be done on a PC with a USB 3.0 cable connected. You can't do this natively wirelessly yet. Perhaps that's on the cards. If you're someone who has an Oculus Link setup, you know, you have a long, thin USB 3.0 cable that you already had set up for Link, congratulations, you're already ready to use this. If you're not, sometimes it is awkward to find a USB port on your PC that's connected to a USB 3.0 controller on your motherboard that is actually fully spec compliant. This was a huge issue in the early days of VR with the original Oculus Rift, where its sensors, a lot of people find out that so many motherboards don't actually pass the USB 3.0 specifications. They're designed to be cheap and effective for 99% of USB devices, but then you plug in something like that Rift sensor that truly uses the full USB 3 bandwidth and your computer just dies. So sometimes that can be an issue with Link, so it can be a bit finicky. But VR Gamer Dude is also saying that they've been testing some of these new features for the on-headset capture, and there's no more audio desync. It sounds incredible. And fixed frame rate, so it's no longer a variable frame rate. Yeah, it sounds like Meta is really starting to take seriously these creator tools. I remember when we talked about this a while ago on this show, maybe a year ago or half a year, I said that I didn't expect widescreen uncropped to happen until headsets had wider field of view, you know, like really, really wide field of view. But obviously, this is the other way to do this. Just render beyond the real field of view.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for all that info, VR Gamer Dude, saying that we're about wireless casting 2.0 in the Meta Development Quest hub is on the roadmap too. Yeah, this is a long time coming and a very, very big addition. I cannot wait for 60. I can't wait to start capturing just alone at 60 frames per second. I was writing this in an article recently. It's when you have stabilized egocentric cameras, both in the real world and in virtual reality, both shipping from Meta. That's what they have this year. Is they're shipping the Ray-Ban glasses as stabilized, head-worn cameras, and people are just now realizing how it feels different to capture video from that perspective. It's more personal. People make eye contact with you, the camera person, and it's an entirely different format for capturing in the real world. Well, this is the equivalent of that technology in VR, and it's really phenomenal to have like the camera get this kind of an upgrade on a regular basis. So I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, as VR Gamer Dude says in the comments, this is something that YouTubers have been begging Meta for years now. So, for Meta to not have done this from now, they're just harming their own, what's the word for it? Organic marketing, I guess. They're just making it that they're making the experience of their product look worse to people who haven't bought it yet by not putting this in. So if this becomes standard, I hope that what happens eventually is that this becomes an option in headset, so you don't have to use a PC. Maybe there's not enough headroom on Quest 2 to do that, but I suspect if they lower the dynamic resolution a bit, they could do that on Quest 3 maybe. Who knows? We'll see. That's going to be a big game changer. You want everyone who's recording video from in this headset for it to look as good as possible. But yeah, maybe we should talk about the next topic.
Yeah, I just want to mention James O'Loughlin's comment here. I just finally retired my fixtured Rift sensors. Good riddance, goodness. You waited a long time on that one. Wow, I've still got my Steam VR 2.0 base stations up in this office though for Beyond. They're keeping the Beyond, the Beyond is keeping those Steam VR tracking base stations alive right now in my house. They're surviving. Let's talk about Meta shooting down the prospect of Quest 3 eye tracking add-on. This was the story I was referring to earlier that I was editing the moment I got out of Banter and had it published on our site. We were talking about this. David, why don't you get into the intricacies here? Because a lot of people out there are probably wondering why Vive did it. It's easy to. It would be assumed to be an easy thing to add a Vive, an eye tracking add-on to a headset if other companies have done it for years. Why is that not the case?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's easy for HTC to have done it. It did take a year after Focus 3 release for this to happen, but they did do it. They released a $250 eye tracking add-on for that same headset we were talking about earlier for the international that's going to the International Space Station. But Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth was asked, and he said there's not really a credible way to do eye tracking or upper face tracking underneath the headset as an accessory. It's something we've thought about every now and again, but for eye tracking, you need to have this illumination all the way around the eyes. You're talking about replacing the eye cups. You'd have cameras in multiple positions. You need to. That's pretty tough. It's in quite tight and sensitive areas. This is something we've looked at, but it's something that they have just decided that they're not doing. And we have a picture here of the add-on for Focus 3, and you can see that you kind of just add this into the facial interface. HTC has always kind of been a bit ahead of Meta when it comes to niche hardware accessories and add-ons and things like this. I think they maybe even teased that something like this could come for XR Elite, but it has not yet. This is still only for Focus 3. But yeah, it's a shame because it means that you can't, if you want a Meta headset with eye tracking, you have to buy the one that uses the last generation processor that has a lower resolution screen and that probably won't see anywhere near as long support as Quest 3. You do get that face and eye tracking, but it comes at a cost. And we'll talk about this maybe later, but reportedly, Meta's next Quest Pro is not going to arrive until 2025. So if you want to be on the Meta headset that has the latest and greatest processor and features, the Quest 3, you're maybe going to have to wait 2 years until you can do that with eye tracking. And that's quite it's strange for this to be shot down. Obviously, Meta will have their engineering reasons, but you often see this thing where Meta will tell you why all these things aren't possible, and then another company just goes and does it anyway.
Well, it's Meta has had a kind of like a sharing how do I describe this? They get data from sharing information early with their audience. So it's actually Meta's done a fairly good job of putting some of their research projects out there into public view on I would say it's a more frequent cadence than Apple, but that could be a inaccurate sort of representation. But Meta's a big participant in things like SIGGRAPH, where they show off future headsets, future technologies. They share those studies out with a lot of people, and those technologies get uh, they get to other companies, but they also kind of like it's a way of Meta showing like we actually don't know what to do with this, and we're going to let others figure it out for us. And that's Meta's done that a couple times in the past, and it's it's frustrating for me. I'm in here in a Quest Pro using the last generation chip. Which headset are you in this week, David?
I'm in a Quest 2.
Yeah. I really don't want to go put on a Quest 2 again. I haven't really um since the Quest 3 has arrived, but I'm back and forth every week now of trying to decide whether I give you these weird facial expressions from time to time or whether I go and try to have the most comfortable headset that runs just a slight bit smoother because like I still feel a little bit of jank, like a little bit of stuttering when I go into the menus that is annoying and I can feel the likelihood that it's going to get worse because of the way Meta like adds new features for the latest chipset. So it's a real bummer to have like this cool feature on a headset that I've got really no other reason to use it than to come into the studio for this.
Yeah, it's you can definitely see the performance difference even in the menu system in Quest 3, but it's that's an optimization issue because Pico 4's interface on the last generation processor is snappy. It's really, really snappy. It's one of the clearest ways to understand what the performance issue is with the Quest system software is to use a Pico 4 because it is night and day. It really does feel like the Pico 4 when you're in the system menu feels as snappy, if not more snappy, than Quest 3. So it really is just a poorly optimized software. Carmack ranted about this for years, rightly so. A lot of this was, high level JavaScript stuff that's being done in this core system interface rather than, low level performance C++.
We're getting close to the end of the show here. I do want to just make that pitch out there that you share this link out on whatever network you're on, get people in here because these last few subjects here are fairly big ones that we want to make sure our discussion here in the comments covers all angles, and then we also cover all angles to this because it is complicated. Meta has cut the price of the Quest 2 to $250 for the rest of the year. So this is some exclusive reporting that we first got out there from UploadVR confirming that this holiday price cut that some of you are seeing on storefronts is actually in place through the end of the year, through to the start of 2024. David, I'm going to let you add your commentary on what you think is going on here because I have my own thoughts.
So I think we should probably talk about these two subjects at the same time because they're just so related. The next subject, so this is the lowest price we've seen for a new standalone headset with track controllers, $250. It is half the price of Quest 3. So on paper, it sounds very attractive if you just want to get into VR and you don't want to spend a huge amount of money. I'm not saying 250 is nothing, but it's not 500. The problem is that there are a lot of indicators that Meta plans to replace Quest 2 within the next year or so, maybe even the next 6 months, with a headset that will be priced similarly, but have that latest generation processor from the Quest 3. And one of the reports from a Chinese analyst who has been accurate in the past and who is being corroborated in the specs claims by the Wall Street Journal last week, is that headset may be branded Quest 3 Lite. So to me, this is almost a clearance sale for Quest 2. In fact, it essentially is a clearance sale for Quest 2. But buying this means that you may be in a situation where within a year or even less, the latest games are not made to run well or look good on Quest 2. And developers start focusing more and more on the larger market and the wall that on the market as it transitions to the XR2 Gen 2, which has more than double the GPU power. The report from the Wall Street Journal this week, it suggested that Meta is working on a partnership with Tencent to bring that Quest 3 Lite to China. So this could be another massive market of customers that are only on the XR2 Gen 2. You then have everyone with Quest 3, and you have everyone in the West who buys Quest 3 Lite. We've seen how Meta can stop focusing on its older hardware over and over again with Go and with Quest. Quest 2 has sold enough that I expect it will be supported for longer than those headsets, but it's still being supported and being the focus are very different things. And unless you really want a headset this year and you don't want to wait, I would strongly personally recommend waiting for Quest 3 Lite rather than buying this.
Yeah, let me get a couple other things out there just as buying advice and info for people. So Meta in the past has had specific deals around Black Friday. So the week of Black Friday, that's the week after this podcast is recorded. There are typically special deals at retailers to keep an eye out for. Given that we confirmed that this deal is through the entire holiday season to the end of the year, I would keep getting disconnected. I am sorry.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah,
having
so
some Wi-Fi connection issues.
it's maddening because I'm listening to him in real time talk about the mesh problems for the network, and it's like I tried to change all of my Wi-Fi settings so that this headset will not crap out on the Wi-Fi every 30 seconds. But yeah, so back to my recommendation here. If you're ignoring us and you're still going to get a Quest 2 this holiday season, my recommendation would be to wait until Black Friday week to see if anything else pops up special. Meta's done it almost every year, going back since the Rift days, to have these special Black Friday and get as many out there. The other thing that I'm just going to throw out there is the GetSupernatural.com offer is parallel to what is going on here. So that is a year of Supernatural, and you can get that with Quest 2 for I think $350. So if you're looking for fitness and you're looking to try to start like a New Year's resolution with VR, a $350 Quest 2 over on the GetSupernatural.com website is a good deal with a year of Supernatural included. Gets you ready to go with trying out virtual reality fitness right out of the gate. But again, I do have to just reinforce what David is saying here about Quest 3. Based on now going back to 2014 when Facebook released its first VR headset in partnership with Samsung. Meta cans old products, stops supporting them, and they become lesser experiences over time. And it's devastating when this process starts happening, when the apps start getting pulled or stop getting supported, and it's feeling like Quest 2 is approaching that in a very, very quick way. And the only reason is because Meta has to be super aggressive in trying to get everyone that they sell to onto the XR2 Gen 2 because everyone is chasing them, right? The entire market is hot on their heels. And so they're making tough choices and cutting old products and forcing everyone onto the new system as quickly as they possibly can. I don't know how to convey to people other than saying it's been miserable for the last 9 years now to go from Gear VR to Oculus Go to Rift and having these old devices that just kind of like start feeling lesser and lesser. So you're already competing with like a device that it's not 2020 vision. It's a step backward from that. You're not going to want to spend hours and hours and hours in this to begin with. Like, it's not like, yeah, these things do gather dust for a lot of people who buy them. And if you get an XR2 Gen 2, you're giving yourself a much better chance at the content being compelling enough for longer enough that this thing will not collect dust. So that's why we recommend so strong. You've got to go try to get that XR2 Gen 2 chip and a Quest 3 instead.
Yeah, exactly. It is a generational upgrade. The upgrade in GPU performance from Quest 2 to Quest 3 is dramatic, and that's what the reports suggest will be in Quest 3 Lite as well. We have this little highly of render of what Quest 3 Lite could possibly, potentially, maybe, possibly look something like possibly from XR Carlos here, and you see kind of just it lacks the color cameras and depth sensor. It's thicker because it uses the Fresnel lenses from Quest 2, reportedly. But you still have this kind of familiar Quest 3 design language. And to be clear, if anyone is not familiar with these Quest 3 Lite reports, the reports so far from the Wall Street Journal, from Bloomberg, and from this Chinese analyst, they indicate that this will essentially be the Quest 2's lens system, Fresnel lenses, with the Quest 3's performance. It's XR2 Gen 2. So it's like souping up a Quest 2 with the XR2 Gen 2. And reportedly, it could land, it's at, say $300 with controllers. So it'll be on a similar kind of price level to Quest 2. And that's why we would recommend, if you do not want to spend $500 on a Quest 3, but you do want VR, just potentially wait for this unless you absolutely can't.
Yeah, and I will be curious to see if there's any Quest 3 deals around Black Friday. It seems, I would think maybe they don't want to sell too much. They want to see how Quest 3 is going to stand on its own, but we'll see if there might even be surprising Quest 3 deals. Andrew Tech, won't developers keep supporting Quest 2 if that market is bigger than Quest 3? Very interesting comment. Yes, they will. And that's, David gave a caveat there that Meta could support this for longer because of that install base. But critically, we have to add that at Meta Connect, we talked to Meta's executives, and there's nothing keeping a developer from right now putting a product on App Lab and targeting Quest 3 alone. Devs could do it right now, and it would probably be in some of their best interests to start there and move forward, right?
Yeah, I think it's not just that I don't suspect that many developers will target Quest 3. But again, I just want to reiterate, it's all in what you mean by the word target. I suspect developers for a long time will want their game to run on Quest 2, but running on Quest 2 doesn't mean running well. I suspect that we're going to see performance slip, we're going to see graphics slip, we're going to see these games designed around the XR2 Gen 2 for Quest 3 and Quest 3 Lite and kind of downported. You see this a lot of the time in when consoles roll on to the next generation. For a long time, developers will still build games for the previous consoles, but you'll notice that the performance and the graphics are just significantly compromised, even compared to games that used to run on those headsets, or sorry, on those consoles. You also saw, I mean, arguably the big tragedy of Cyberpunk was that they tried so hard to make it work on last gen consoles that they extended their development time by years and delivered a terrible product because they were just trying to build a game for hardware that wasn't powerful enough to run. And had they just targeted the current generation consoles, or as they were called at the time, the next gen consoles, they wouldn't have had a lot fewer issues. That's an argument to be made there. But yeah, again, we've seen before what happens when PC VR titles are ported over to Quest without being designed for Quest first, and they look terrible at times. I just think that effect may happen sooner rather than later for Quest 3 and Quest 2 games.
Hard to get comment here. Devs have to account for active users. Maybe Quest 3 active users can catch up faster even with lower numbers of units sold. And that's a fantastic comment. And related to that is the idea that the charging dock that David Heaney just reviewed completely changes the active kind of, all the reasons why you kept out of VR are solved with that as such an integral part of the process. So that is interesting math that Meta is learning right now, is what, do they make up the difference? It's such a more expensive product, but it's lighter, and you have the charging dock as a core part of the experience. So we'll see.
Yeah, the retention could be very, very different. It's just all of those little things coming together, the improved comfort, the improved lenses, the improved display, the improved graphics. All of these things will just potentially make people want to use their Quest 3 more than they ever used their Quest 2.
And let's definitely talk about this next Well,
Final.
yeah, I guess I didn't really. I wanted to talk about the Quest 3 Lite to China a little bit because I didn't comment on that very much, but we don't have to. I just think it's really interesting the full circle aspect of moving back into China is something that could haunt Mark Zuckerberg for years if he doesn't do it right, or he could do it essentially what he could.
I think we just lost Ian there, so I'll just have a look at some comments here. Little Scampy saying it'll be great to see the next Steam report hardware survey on the current headset numbers. That'll be fascinating because obviously the current, as we pointed out last week, the current Steam hardware survey numbers are excluding a huge portion of Quest buyers from the first half of the month and also excluding virtual desktop. So yeah, that'll be one of the first indicators of adoption of Quest 3. The next one to really look out for that we'll be reporting on as soon as it happens is Meta's Q4 earnings report, which will be, I believe, in January, but don't quote me on that. And that's when we will see the revenue numbers from the Reality Labs division through the Quest 3 launch. And that will be probably the strongest indicator of Quest 3 success because Meta does not reveal sales numbers. If we're still talking about this topic of Quest 3 Lite coming to China, according to the Wall Street Journal. So again, this headset that takes Quest 2's optics and Quest 3's chip and puts them together into a midpoint product, that could be a death spell for Pico. Pico is obviously already struggling. We've talked about that last week. We've talked about it this week. But if they then have Meta streaming into their home territory while they aren't able to compete into Meta's home territory, they would be fairly screwed. Pico would have a big challenge there that could maybe perhaps have been one of the reasons for ByteDance's downsizing of Pico. We don't know. Yeah, so ADR2T saying that you can't wait till they get app support from Google. That will be big in terms of just Oliver software is king. I don't know if you're referring to Meta there. Meta, as we talked about last week, Google said no to bringing the Play Store to Quest. So it seems like the opposite. Maybe perhaps you're talking about Google and Samsung as we put that image up there a second ago. I think Ian is now returning, so we can talk about that more. Andrew Tech asks, does Steam survey identify Airlink users properly? Yes, it does. Hello again. I was just sort of pointing out how Quest 3 Lite entering China might be a death spell for Pico. That was just all I was saying on that.
Yeah, I'm in Quest 3 now, so let's see if the Wi-Fi is any better over here.
It looks a lot smoother.
I'm curious to see how Meta does in like how big this is for Meta. This could be like such a big win or such a big problem over the long term. And I can't fathom if they're going to do things different with this Tencent partnership in China. Like how does a dev release content for Tencent based Quest 3 Lite and then also get it onto the Quest store? And if they do that right, that's just such a massive win in both directions for Meta. If they can have like great Chinese-based content, make the transition over to the Western world, have great content in the Western world, make its way into China, that's hypothetically, I would imagine what Mark Zuckerberg's trying to achieve with this. But how it actually plays out is going to be weird.
So yeah, according to reports that they would go through Meta for the Western market and through Tencent for the Chinese market. Yes, Tencent would handle the content in the store in China. That obviously, yes, as you say, if they for the cost of some Chinese localization, they could access an enormous potential new market. This could be huge for VR developers if this product takes off well in China. You know, you're getting this massive influx potentially of new customers that are using the XR2 Gen 2 and are looking for fresh content. It'll be probably one of the biggest moments in the global VR market if this does happen. You know, we haven't seen VR expand into an entirely new market like this from the Western companies quite yet. Just lost Ian again there. Obviously, he's still having some sort of Wi-Fi connection issues. Hello again.
It's weird. My audio resets every time I disconnect from the studio, so I have to turn it up again to hear you. Yeah, we ready to talk about our last few subjects here? Where are we?
Yeah, we have the last subject now just to talk about Google and Samsung.
Yeah, this is the sort of wrap-up subject here as we really get into what 2024 will hold. I will be curious if anyone in our comments wants to make predictions. If there's any predictions that sound pretty believable, I'll call them out on our show, and you'll have a nice little clip out there to call out as something that could play out next year. I want to just preface before you get into explaining this, David. We are becoming like a broken record of expecting each year to be the year VR takes off. And we kind of got sucked in over the last few years with knowing Apple was coming, knowing the fire of Apple was so near that like there was enough smoke there to indicate that an actual product was coming, but it kept getting pushed and kept getting pushed. And now we've gone through 2023 where Pico may have just died, one of the only companies to stand up an effort against Meta over the last few years. But now we're approaching 2024, and it sounds like it's not just Apple, it's not just Meta. There's other players that are going to get very serious. Why don't you run it through?
So I first just want to push back on this idea of the year VR takes off. I mostly hate this concept. Other than that, I would say that it already happened. Quest 2 was the moment VR took off. Like I said, I think I said this last week. Before Quest 2, you could count you could very rarely find someone who owned a VR headset. You know, maybe if you knew a PC gamer friend, they might have a Rift or a Vive from 2016. Maybe they have a Rift S or something. But you know, you talk to any regular person, you're out in the world, and you tell them you work in VR, and they would not know that anyone who owned a headset. Now, again, as I said last year, you know, often I'm in a barber shop and I say what I do, and they either say, you know, a barber shop or an Uber or, you know, a bartender or just general people who are not in technology, who are not PC gamers, they're not techie people. And so often I hear either, oh, I have one of those, or my brother has one of those, or my, you know, my kid or my uncle or my housemate or my friend. And every time it's, which one? Oh, you know, the white one that's wireless. It's always the Quest 2. It's the moment where regular people en masse, you know, north of 10 million, around 20 million potentially, started to purchase headsets. That doesn't mean that this is the end point, but if you're talking about like when on the graph in history does VR go from almost impossible to see to starts to take off into the tens of millions, that moment happened with Quest 2. Again, it's only the start of taking off, and you know, it is down to the semantics of what do you mean by takeoff, what do you mean by mainstream, but again,
Yeah,
it's happening right now.
I think that's fair. Yeah, it's just I'm seeing one of our comments, Anthony, saying we will see full-bodied AR avatars in Quest 3, and that's like a digital character from the Blade Runner sequel. I think that's one of several examples, right? Voice recognition, AI generation, the quality of the displays, all these things, as well as the thing we've just spent a huge portion of the show discussing, the XR2 Gen 2. All of these things are combining at one time to accelerate the VR market in ways that I don't think people are ready for. Just to David's point about Quest 2 being a breakthrough, that was the thing that had, you know, it shipped without great hand tracking. It shipped without great PC VR connection. It didn't have good pass through even. It just had like worse than passable pass through, as David described it. It had all these things, and it still did exceedingly well. And we expect Meta to repeat that with a Quest 3 Lite. And that's not even scratching the surface of all the things that are going to happen in VR next year. So it's exciting times in a very, very big way. But I want to hear you talk about the chips. Really key here, David. What chip do you think Samsung and Google are going to use?
Well, just before, let's just give an overview of what we're even talking about them shipping here. So, you know, if people aren't familiar, earlier this year in February, Samsung confirmed it was making a headset with Google powering the software and Qualcomm providing the chip. And so this week, last week, a report from a South Korean newspaper that's considered a paper of record reported that it will announce the headset at an event in the second half of 2024 and then launch it in December with a limited initial quantity of just 30,000 units, suggesting this is going to be a high-end, expensive headset. And we independently confirmed, we at UploadVR independently confirmed that Samsung told developers it plans to launch in late 2024. So all of the rumors we've heard about this headset so far suggest that it is going to be a high-end Vision Pro competitor, not a $500 Quest 3 competitor. Earlier this month, Qualcomm confirmed to a news outlet and to us that it plans to announce a new XR chipset in the first half of 2024. It did not give many details about what this was, but suggested it would be higher end than the XR2 Gen 2 that just went in to Quest 3. So as we talked about when we talked about that in a previous episode, a previous recent episode, we suspect that it's going to be a chip that's designed for headsets that will take on Vision Pro, that it may use the new Orion CPU cores that are Qualcomm's first fully custom CPU cores built from their acquisition of a small startup Nuvia, which was consisting of former Apple and Google chip designers. So this is Qualcomm getting serious, taking on Vision Pro, and Samsung could be the first to release a headset of that tier, with Google providing the software through Android XR and Qualcomm providing that chip, while reportedly Meta will sit out for a while and stay out of the high-end market until 2025.
Yeah, so one of the predictions here, people talking about where was it? The Pixel Galaxy Vision Ultra. I like that naming idea for the next Samsung headset. The XR3, if we actually get it, is going to be a beast. And it would be surprising if Meta wasn't there shipping a headset with it first. And one of the theories that we've discussed is the idea that maybe Meta had a chance to take that XR3 and wasn't ready to place an order for them in the right timeline to make Qualcomm happy, and then Samsung and Google teamed up to fill that hole. Obviously, Meta can follow up and do a Vision Pro, a Quest Pro 2 with an XR3, but maybe they had to get in a line behind the first company to purchase that chip. That's an interesting theory. We'll have to see how it plays out. But it's boggling my mind to think that this also adds more weight to our earlier recommendation that you do not get a Quest 2. If you're discussing the possibility that not only will the XR2 Gen 2 feel outdated relative to this chip, like this is more evidence you don't get a Quest 2. Let's just start there, right?
I mean, these are very different devices. A Quest 2 is a $250 headset, and reportedly this is going to be somewhere around $2,000. I don't think I think very few people are in the same market here. If you're looking to play VR games for cheap, I don't think you're going to care about this, because reportedly this thing isn't going to have controllers. This is not going to be a Quest style headset. This is going to be a Vision Pro competitor for sitting on your seat for most of the use cases of seeing your existing apps from Android in spatial computing. I don't see the connection there, but I do think obviously it means that, yes, if developers are focusing on these new chips, the XR2 Gen 2 and the XR3 or whatever it ends up being called, yeah, you're going to just feel further and further behind if you are on that Quest 2. I get what you're saying in that sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get why you're describing it that way too. I think I'm just very, you know, we are one of the few people that have tried all of these headsets out. Our audience is one of the few communities that use these devices on almost a daily basis. And they have a unique understanding of just how crummy or useful these devices are for their various use cases. So right now, as we're doing this show, there's new people coming in here going, what do I buy first? Am I ready to try out VR fitness? Am I ready to try out VR gaming? Or do I need to wait for the next thing? And Vision Pro and its chipset provides a different experience than what you get out of a Meta Quest 3. Yeah, Quest 3 is a great gaming experience, but it's very VR focused. It's a great experience once you're in VR. Having great pass through, showing your environment, the possibility of mixed reality experiences, those are the things that might be possible at the XR3 level, or might even be better at the XR3 level than what you get out of the XR2 Gen 2. And no one except me and like a couple hundreds of devs who have found an Apple rep in a major city to demo a Vision Pro. Those are the only people who can understand how much money an XR3 type chip is worth experientially, right? Like no one has set eyes on how much better this content is than the mixed reality you see out of an XR2 Gen 2, and we need to have that experience for people to think whether they'd be willing to spend $2,000 on this.
Yeah, I noticed that we talked earlier about the iPhone 15 Pro spatial video impressions from CNET and TechRadar. I noticed that one of those reports, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, they said they'd recently been using a Quest 3 in the few days before. And, they said just explicitly, within, was it 24 or 48 hours of going between these headsets, that the pass through in Vision Pro is just in a different universe. And if Samsung and Google can deliver on that too, then this headset becomes something that for that kind of augmented or mixed reality, whatever you want to call it, spatial computing is just far more compelling than Quest 3 because you don't have this grainy, warpy view of the world. You have a clear, sharp, undistorted view of the world potentially.
Yeah, I'm seeing someone, where is it? Evil saying you can watch this in VR and big screen. I thought, yeah, there are some people who set up watch rooms over in big screen. We were actually talking to Kyle. If you think this would be interesting, let us know in the comments. And but we had talked to Kyle about maybe getting him into a room in big screen, and at the beginning of our show here, throwing up the room code for anyone that wants to go join and watch our show in big screen from VR. We thought that might be a cool thing to try sometime before the end of the year. So let us know if
Yeah,
you're interested in that.
I think that came off a question of someone, saying that, we're watching a YouTube video of two people in VR talking about VR rather than being in VR with them in person. And yeah, look, that's something we would love to do. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's just that at the end of the day, this is a side project for us. And our main job is reporting on what's happening in VR and putting out news articles in a very fast moving industry with a very small team. If there's a month where there is almost no VR news and the news drops down low and I have the free time to do it. We are actually closer than you may think, but it's just one of those things where we can't compromise our core focus of delivering you the most, we hope, the most accurate and contextualized and usefully informative VR news of any outlet.
I do want to say, yeah, so thank you for David Heaney's holding, like it's tough. This is I can't even imagine how many hours and passion project he's put into this studio just because he loves the idea of it. But it is a side project, right? And what's fascinating about that is like we have an audience here. We love that you love this format. We love talking with you. It's working. We want to keep building on it. But it's a completely different animal than the way we write about our news and get that stuff out under embargo sometimes, or waiting. It's just a completely different thing. But we want to do both. We want to keep building both, and it's hard. And one of the ways to do that is use existing platforms. So we've looked at Banter, and that's one thing we might consider. And also just this idea of a big screen was a cool idea for us to consider.
Yeah, we'd love to do other platforms. Just we very much so streamline this experience around removing friction around. Our image casting system here is linked directly to our website. We didn't have to preload all these images that we show you each week into some system or kind of awkwardly search through a web browser and maximize it and cast it. I have on my tablet in front of me just an interface that I can search every image that we've ever used in an article and cast it up immediately. And we have that linked to our YouTube channel. In future, we hope to have our article videos in this. I have, the comments here preloaded. No need to go and navigate to a URL. It's preloaded. I have a note system that's connected to a note system on our website that is, again, linked in and integrated without any separate browser. To do this, without these things pre-built, we would have to kind of have like 3 different browser tabs open and be switching between them while we're trying to speak to you. We also have the auto switching cameras. We have no joining friction at all. There's no room codes, there's no invites, there's no servers to depend on. We do all this ourselves. So it, the issue with, I would love another platform to deliver this experience. I just think I don't see it happening from the general purpose platforms. I think someone needs to build an app that literally just does this, but that's quite
Yeah.
niche. We've seen recently the VStreamer Live app, which is kind of a single player version of this, where you can put backgrounds on your avatar and have 3D props and things and cast directly to YouTube, stream directly to YouTube. But again, the complexity of developing a networked app is an order of magnitude higher than developing a single user app. As soon as you add networking to something, and the state has to be synchronized, and you have to make sure that you never drop a second of audio while you do all of this, it's just a different level of complexity.
Yeah, and those timestamps that we talked about earlier in the show with Banter, where 8:54 or what was it? 8:54. He's like, "Okay, I'll meet you," and then at 9 he says, "I'm in." 10 minutes later, I've timed it in this show. I've gone into this studio at 12:58 p.m. Pacific time and been ready to broadcast with you 2 minutes later. And that's because of the friction system that he's custom built here. And I like, yeah, I could maybe go for 5 minutes more, but 10 minutes more is actually across the line of too much friction to come in and do this. Like that's what we're talking about on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think for me, it's still just the integration with our site and our notes and our comments. How, like, yes, you could do this with virtual web browsers, but you're managing like 3 of them in a way. Realistically, you probably need to have a keyboard connected as well. But yeah, we're going to explore that. We're completely open minded about it. It's something we very much so plan on exploring. But perhaps as well, if we get some time as the news lulls at the end of the year, as developers and companies start taking time off, we will be able to just get our virtual audience out ourselves. We have a lot of it done. I don't want to tease anything more, but a lot of it is built out. It's just a matter of getting the time to really get it ready to ship.
Is there anything else on the subject? Because I do want to make that pitch once more as we're discussing this. We've seen quite a number of people over this year come and support us as members of UploadVR.com, remove those ads from the site, get our news straight without any of the ads getting in the way. And that is a very real way of supporting our work, supporting the development of the studio, supporting us going out and asking these questions, hosting these conversations, and getting to the really core of what's happening in the VR market so you're more informed and can help the people in your life get ready for what's coming. Anything you want to close out there before we say bye to our audience this week?
Just having a look at the comments. Just some people talking about, that in general, the general market, people are comparing the Quest 3 to Vision Pro, even despite the large price gulf. Yeah. Iron Meds VR asks what's in front of us. There are 3 cameras, and we can see each camera go red as it switches. There's also a kind of floating monitor that shows us how long we've been streaming for. So right now it says 1 hour and 57 minutes. We can see the amount of people that are currently watching, 194. We can see when it's live and not. So there will be like a red frame around the monitor that you can see when it's live, and we can see like a preview screen. We see a virtual view of that camera, a render texture of what the camera is seeing. So at all times we can see what you're seeing. We can see which camera's on, and then there's also in the corner there a seat for if a third person is wanting to join and to communicate something to us or coordinate something behind the scenes.
Yeah, so we're able to know the camera's auto switch. That was one thing I told Banter that we would need in order to consider an auto, like a switching system, is the camera. I'm shown a red light there that this camera is on right now. If David starts speaking, it'll be that camera over there. If we throw an image up onto the screen, it'll be both of us, and we can see the red light there. It's a perfect analogy for a classic studio, but it's purpose built for us and what we need. It's like we stress out about this ourselves on like whether we should be spending more time on this or getting the news out, and I think getting the news out has always been the right choice. So we're going to stick to that, and yeah, support our work so that we can send more of those emails and get more people into the studio, do those interviews, ask those questions that we really need to ask. People said you know, I'll just throw it out there. So Meta did this podcast with what's his name? Lex Friedman, one of the biggest, probably the biggest podcaster in the world, next to maybe Joe Rogan. Like those would be two of the biggest names in podcasting. And Mark Zuckerberg appeared in VR as himself with their futuristic codec avatars. Um, we want that in the studio. I've reached out to Meta specifically to say we need those in the studio. What do we need to do to get on the list to do that? Now, I'm just gonna like it's scary to ask that question because you're actually giving power to the person you're asking the question to, because you're telling them that what they've got is a really, really interesting thing and they can do something else with it. So I'm going to throw it out there to Apple and anyone else that has super hyper realistic avatars. We want to support them. We want to appear in VR as ourselves. But these platforms have to figure out how they're going to roll out to large amounts of people, how they don't freak people out in the process, because these are scary technologies. Like they change the way you live, and that's fundamentally scary for a lot of people out there. Um, we want to ask questions, the hard questions about how this is going to change people's lives, and you're not going to get that everywhere. We've seen the way major companies test the waters for like whether they're going to share information with people. We need to ask the hardest questions. We need to press and try to get that news out. And that's what we're going to do with our platform in VR. It's what we're going to do on our website. And I'm extremely proud of the work David Heaney has done, all our whole team has done over the last few months, putting those questions out there. And yeah, it's going to be an amazing year next year as like millions of people get into VR for the first time. We don't want them to be confused about what's coming, and that's what we want to do with our platform. So thank you so much for supporting us so far. And yeah, I think that's as close to a manifesto as I think you're going to get out of us. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, everyone. And yeah, 2024 is going to be a heck of a year, given Apple, potentially Samsung, Quest 3 Lite, and maybe Valve. Who knows? Maybe other entrants we don't even know about yet. It's very clear that people are seeing now that this is a real market. The technology is finally catching up to all of the aspirations of the past 10 years. What was only possible to do with a expensive PC tethered to a expensive headset is now becoming possible to do in some ways even better on a couple of $100 standalone wireless headsets that are getting slimmer every year and having more and more capabilities, and getting upper body tracking and all of this. That we are still in the early days of this. It is moving fast. This is going to be moving faster than any other hardware industry. We're in the era where smartphones are plateauing, even laptops and in some ways PCs and other devices are plateauing, but these headsets, they are going to advance fast and have major differences from year to year. So thank you everyone for watching, and yes, we will see you again next week.